Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the Alabama Student Eagles podcast. My name is Brady Johnson, and today we are really excited to be joined by U.S. Congressman Barry Moore, who is also running as a candidate right now for Senate. And so we're really excited to have him on the podcast today. So, Congressman Moore, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be on with you, Brady. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Well, this is going to be, I'm really excited for this conversation and really looking forward to hearing your perspective on some of the things that are going on right now in our country and how you look to really improve the lives of the people in Alabama with your work in Congress and possibly in the Senate moving forward. And so I'd love to just dive right into it and really hit on some of the major issues that are going on right now. But first of all, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your story. What got you involved in politics? What made you decide that these issues mattered enough for you to run for Congress?
Well, actually, I never thought I'd run for office. It wasn't something I really wanted to do. In 2008, the Republican Party came to me. I'm a business owner. I graduated from Auburn, came back, started a waste hauling company. And 2008, the party came and said, would you consider running? No, it was actually 2006, that cycle. They wanted me to run. I said, no, I've got a young company. I got young kids at home. I just don't really feel compelled to run. And then 2008 was when Barack Obama said, we're no longer a Christian nation. And I told my wife, Heather, if they ever ask us again, we need to be willing to step up and serve this country in whatever capacity that looks like, because if we as Christians don't engage, we're going to lose our voice in the process. And so in 2010, the party came and said, would you consider again running? And so we ran for the state legislature. We were part of that first Republican majority in the state legislature in 136 years. And so got elected and beat a three-term Democrat and started voting conservative. And it was a interesting 8 years that I served in Montgomery. And like I said, it was something I really didn't ever think of doing, but we really felt led to do it. And have got elected in 2010 to the first job we had as a politician or a public official. And so been in the fight since then.
Yes. So I know that early on in 2016, you came out in support of Trump. And so I'm really interested to hear your take on the past year and a half since Trump was elected in 2024, because obviously a lot has happened since then. And, there's, of course, a lot of division right now in the country, and you see Trump derangement syndrome in full swing on the left. But I would be really interested to hear your perspective and kind of what your take is or what your view is on this first part of the Trump administration.
Yeah, so it was August 21st, 2015, Lad People Stadium. I was the first elected official in the nation endorsing that day, and we were at the stadium, and there were a lot of candidates in that primary. And the guys from Trump, Alabama, I said, would any of you guys be willing to endorse Donald Trump today? Well, we had Rubio coming to Alabama. This was the 2016 presidential cycle. Let's see, we had Rubio. There was a 17-way primary. I mean, so we had a lot of people. Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, was in that race. And so they came down to the south end of the stadium, knocked on the door and said, would any of y'all be willing to endorse? Well, Heather and I, we were like, that's kind of above our pay grade. So we went down the hall, said a quick prayer, and got a piece about endorsing this guy from New York City in a 17-way primary. There was a less than 1% chance he would get the nomination. And conventional wisdom was he couldn't win that race. But we got a piece about endorsing a guy who didn't have a chance. And so as we were going through the tunnel, there were only four that day in Alabama. And there were 30,000 people, but there were four people that were elected officials that endorsed that day. And we were going through the tunnel. My buddy said, Barry, you want to go first? You want to go last? There's only four of us. And I said, well, Ed, I guess I'll go first. And so August 21st, 2015, I became the first elected official in the nation to endorse a guy from New York City who didn't have a chance. But we were where we thought we needed to be. And so he won and did his first 4 years, and they targeted him. You know how awful that first four was. I mean, impeachment, they did all the things. They started the Russian collusion narrative into that term. And so into this term, I think one of the things the president has done better is he's not trusting the swamp. He's not trusting the bureaucracy. He came in with a new mindset, because when he went in 16, he thought, well, I'm a CEO. I'll go in, I'm the president. These guys will execute my plans according to my will and wishes. And the system fought him every step of the way. And so this time, I think what he's done differently is he has surrounded himself with people that he can trust, people who are tough, but are also outside of the swamp that'll do the job that needs to get done. And so for me, the first 12, 13 months now of this administration has been actually historic in so many ways. We're looking at the big, beautiful bill, the largest tax cut in American history we passed We've got, let's see, we passed it. He signed it on July 4th, actually. And so that was part of that process. But securing the U.S. southern border, I mean, think about that. Joe Biden was issuing Disney fast passes to everybody that came across the southern border, just letting people pour into this country. And so for him to say, I'm going to secure the border and to do it as rapidly as he has done it, it's astounding to me. We had Sheriff Daniels come into Judiciary Committee before this term. And I asked Sheriff Daniels, I said, tell me about the border. He said, I've been on the border 40 years. He said, in Trump's first term, it was the most secure I'd ever seen it. Now we were talking about this during Biden's term. He says, the worst I've ever seen it. And now Trump has come in and made it even better than it was in 16. He literally shut it down. And so fentanyl and all that stuff has been the deaths of fentanyl we're seeing has dropped dramatically. Obviously the border crossings, we have a net negative. People are deporting themselves back to their country because we're saying you're not going to be on the government dime anymore. You can't live here and not work and produce, and you need to assimilate to our country's, our history and our traditions and that sort of thing. And so I think on the border, he's done an incredible job. On the economy, this big, beautiful bill is doing great things. GDP is growing and inflation is down dramatically, 1.7% the last 3 months of last year. And so that brings inflation down. If we're not printing money like drunk sailors and we're not wasting your money, then your dollars go further. We don't have to print it. You don't have to compete against printed dollars. And so I think on the economy, he's done amazing things. The recruitment of industry. I mean, in his he told us a few weeks ago he has $17 trillion in offshore investment committed to this country in the first 12 months. Prior to that, I think Biden got 1 trillion over 4 years, and he's gotten 17 trillion. It's the largest we'd ever seen. 3 trillion was the largest we'd ever seen in 1 year. So I think on the economy, he's done good things on the border, and man, being able to be a leader on the world stage, what he did with Maduro and Venezuela, the way he's been able to bring peace to regions of the country. He's had countries walk away from war because he's threatened tariffs on both presidents of those nations. And to bring peace in 8 regions of the world, eight possible wars would have broken out. And so now we're respected again. That's something we're not on apology tours around the country or around the world. We're on an America First tour, but we're here to help our allies. And I think just man, you got to give them an A+ so far.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of my main takeaways from the last year and a half has been just the contrast between Democrat leadership that we saw under Biden and then Republican leadership that we've seen under Trump. And it really is a stark contrast when you look at what we had under the Biden years, especially for me, thinking about when you talked about leadership on the global stage and that other countries are actually starting to respect us again. I think that's a huge deal because we actually have a leader now in the White House instead of a passive president like we had under Joe Biden. And now other countries are recognizing that and realizing that, Trump means business and he's here and he's serious about putting America first. And so I definitely agree. And I think that obviously Trump has done a lot of great things for this first part of the administration, and there's a lot more to get done moving forward. And so on that note, I would love to ask you a little bit about what your priorities will be if elected senator. What are some of the main issues moving forward facing our nation right now that you think need a lot of attention and that you would be prioritizing if you were elected to the Senate?
Yeah, let's start short term. First, we got to continue to support the president's America First agenda, which continues to fund the defense of this nation to make sure we're safe, restore law enforcement, the enforcement of actual laws on the book. President Trump famously said we didn't need new laws on immigration, we needed a new president. And so I think initially the short term is that we make sure that we push the America First agenda forward. What the president wants to do, we're continuing to build a border wall, continue to support law enforcement, continue to clean up the mess of these sanctuary cities, what we're seeing up in Minneapolis. That sort of stuff has to be done. And then I think long term, obviously, we're going to position America to grow in the golden age of America that the president talks about. We're doing that with tariffs and less government spending. We're reducing taxes and regulatory environment. That's one tax that people don't recognize a lot of times. If a president can't raise your taxes, if he's trying to cripple the economy, whether it's energy or whatever that looks like, they can come in with a regulatory environment. So I think that we push through to make sure we decrease regulations, we decrease taxes, we secure the border, we reinforce law enforcement. And long term, I'm on the Sharia-free caucus. I think we have to look at that for America because we just launched the Sharia-free caucus probably about 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. There's maybe 30 or 40 members from between the House and the Senate. But if you're looking long term, if you look what's happened in Europe with open borders, London and Paris, those cities are in disarray and they're electing Muslim leaders. And, if you know anything about Muslim countries, you lose your freedom, you lose your liberty, you lose your religious opportunities to worship however you want to worship. And women lose their opportunities. It is a cancer that devours everything it touches. And so I think long term, we have to look at the failures in Paris. We have to look at the failures in London. And as that group is starting to move to America, we have them in large sections, obviously in Minneapolis, obviously in New York now, Mamdani, and in Texas. I was out in Texas a few weeks ago and I met with some Jewish friends, some Hindu friends, some Christian friends out there. And outside, they're starting to build these mosques. They're calling this area the Epic. And what happens is once the Muslims start developing those areas, if you're non-Muslim, you pay 3 times the HOAs on your home. So what happens is it forces non-Muslims out of those communities. Then they vote and elect Muslims, and then they try to enforce Sharia law, and they tell your law enforcement, don't come into our communities. And so that long term has to be something people are asleep at the wheel on this, but we have to make sure that that does not encroach in America. If you want to come to this country, we have one law. It's called the Constitution of the United States. We're not going to let you, you're not going to come in here and force some other kind of law on citizens that are supposed to live under our Constitution. And look, there's 57 Islam countries around the world. If you want to be Islam, go there. Don't come here because we're not going to allow that. And so I think long term, Brady, we have to be aware that that is a cancer and it's taken over a lot of places where it's went. Like I said, we've got it in New York now. We don't want that to spread as a nation. We need to do some serious surgery and some serious chemo to get that stuff out of here.
Yes, and another thing that's kind of related to that is the danger of possible terrorism, with there being potential sleeper cells in the United States because of obviously the mass immigration that was allowed under the Biden administration. And the reason why I say that's something that's especially relevant right now is obviously with the recent developments in Iran. And so that is something that I wanted to ask you about as well, just to get your take on that. What are your thoughts on the recent Iran strikes and the US and Israel taking out these Iranian leaders? Do you have any opinions on that you would like to share with our audience, especially since we have a lot of Gen Z audience members out there? I'm sure that they would love to get some clarity, especially moral clarity on this issue, because I think with all of those opinions out there online, it can be really difficult to get clarity on these issues. So I would love for you to share some of your thoughts with our audience about these recent developments in the Middle East.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think you're right. Your generation and Generation X folks have so much information, and you have to kind of sort through it, right? I mean, you have to pick out the good stuff, kind of see what makes sense. But
Yeah.
I absolutely support the president on this because if you look at what he's done in Venezuela, those people are now free. They're actually the energy that with the oil was being controlled by the tyrants, being sold to China, being sold to Cuba. And so what he did in Venezuela was a strategic strike that took out the just Madero. I mean, he just plucked him and his wife out, brought them back to court up here in trial in New York City. But the same in Iran, I think for President Trump, and the information that I can share with you is that he was trying to get the regime in Iran to negotiate. He spent a lot of time trying to get those guys to the table. He offered them what they needed to make nuclear power, but no warheads. But Iran was not willing to budge on any issue. And so it's because that non-negotiable leadership that they just don't want to talk to anybody. They're going to do it their way. And so when he killed those 32,000, when they executed those 32,000 Iranians a few weeks ago that were just wanting liberty and freedom, they've been out of that since 1979. 47 years, women haven't had a right to go to a park without their husband. They have to cover their faces. They're not allowed to get an education. That sort of system, those people were wanting that freedom and liberty. And so to me, the litmus test is just look at the Iranian citizens in America and around the globe, the ladies that are ripping off the hijabs and they're dancing in the streets. The people that I'm actually met an Iranian today when I spoke, and he said, I just want to tell you to tell President Trump, thank him for freeing our nation. We fled from there under great oppression. And so for us, I think it was twofold. I mean, Israel's an ally in the region. Iran kept building the warheads, 100 a day. They're the number one sponsor of terror around the world. They developed Hezbollah. They developed all the Persian Gulf pirates. They were funding that war on any of our shipping down in that area. In addition to that, I mean, they're behind Hamas. And so all these groups are being funded by this number one terror sponsor state in the world is in Iran. And I think now that Iran has attacked some of the other Arab nations around them, it's like they really have put themselves in a tough spot because they even attacked nations that weren't in this with us. And so I think that if you look at just this started in 79, they bombed our barracks in Beirut, they bombed the coal. Out of the soldiers we lost in the Iran, or I mean in the Iraq war, 10% of them were killed by Iranian weapon systems and by Iranian attacks. And so they've been at war with us for a long time. Whether we were at war with them or not was never the question. They were after us. And so
Yep.
I think that we had to do that in order to try to help that area, that region. The prince of, he's the Shah's son. He's willing to go back and kind of help give real freedom and liberty to those people in a really democratic form of government. And so I think the best litmus test on this for young people is to look at how the people of Iran and the ladies in Iran, the young people around the world, are celebrating what President Trump has done to liberate their country.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. I would say, the way to look at this is by looking at the reaction of the Iranian people. And when you do that, you realize how evil this regime was and how it was oppressing its own citizens. And when you see that, you realize just how horrible this regime was. And so I think that's a really good answer. And it really does provide some moral clarity on this issue, which I think is really important right now. Like I was saying earlier, with all of those different opinions and viewpoints out there that especially young people will see online. So I think having moral clarity on these issues is a really important thing. So I just want to leave global affairs and national issues for a second and really bring it more local. And I wanted to ask you, what are some issues that you think are facing Alabama specifically right now? If you're elected senator, what are some things that you think you can do to actually improve the lives of people living here in the state of Alabama?
Yeah, to me, there's no government program like a job, right? I mean, if you can find good paying wages, our young people, our kids can come back to our communities and they can develop families. And we always want the grandbabies close, but if we don't have jobs and opportunities, the kids can't stay here, so they move off. And so for me, it's how do we position Alabama in the future to be, instead of just the golden age of America, the golden age of Alabama. And when I was in the state legislature, we brought Airbus to Alabama. We brought Kimber Firearms. We brought Remington. We brought Parrott, Polaris. We brought Austell, all those companies manufacturing. And now you just saw Spacecoms coming back to Alabama. Obviously, Lilly's announced a $6 billion investment. Novellus is doing $4 billion in Baldwin County. So for us, I think we need to invest in infrastructure. So we make sure that we have the roads to get the goods and services to and from so companies can keep growing, but also workforce development. I mean, we need young people. Not everybody's going to go to a four-year college. I don't recommend that for everybody. There are some incredible opportunities in industry and manufacturing and some of the high-tech fields that if we really can figure out how to train our workforce, people who don't want to go to get a four-year degree that's not much use, they can actually go to some of these schools, these workforce development programs. Junior college systems, whatever that looks like, and they could come out making 80, 100 grand a year and not have all that student loan debt. So we got to figure out how we position to have land. We know in Alabama we've got the land and the climate. We used to have land, labor, and climate conducive to growing the economy. Now I think we've got the land, we've got the climate, we've got to make sure we can backfill on labor. And that means training young people to give high-paying jobs so they can provide for their families. And so it's going to be a broad approach. I think we have to, like I said, we have to figure out the infrastructure. We have to keep our tax and regulatory environment that's continues to keep Alabama open for business. And of course, we want to make sure we train the workforce so they can find good jobs. They can stay here in Alabama and live in this great state.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And a lot of it really goes back to government efficiency and effectiveness with what the government can do to practically improve the lives of their constituents. And, I hear from a lot of people who will complain about the current state of Congress, or at least the job that Congress has been doing. And I think that really that efficiency and effectiveness that we see in government has been lacking in recent decades, really, in this country. And I know that you obviously have an inside perspective on that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what can be done to improve efficiency and effectiveness in government and in Congress specifically.
Well, I've been in DC 5 years, and so I went in 2020. And the thing that I joined the House Freedom Caucus, those are the guys that are friends of mine that are in the fight. They understand conservative ideas. And for us, efficiency means less wasteful spending, right? I mean, if that lowers tax rates, it also lowers inflation. It does a lot of things if we just get our spending under control. But just going after the USAID like we recently did, defunding that waste, finding this waste, fraud, and abuse in Somalia. I mean, in Minneapolis with all the Somalian folks shipping money overseas, those are the kind of things that I think we're doing. We just had the Republican majority. I mean, we just got President Trump 20 months ago. Like, well, about 15 months ago now, 14 months. And so I think for us going in and cleaning up the wasteful spending, pulling the veil back so it's transparent, so you see what we're doing. And look, we're on the verge of passing. We've passed 11 of the 12 appropriations bills, which are the spending bills for this nation. And if we get this 12th one across the finish line, that'll be the first time in 3 decades we've actually passed the appropriations, the spending process through committee, through normal order. Prior to that, for 30 years, our government's been doing these CRs, just continuing resolutions, just keep spending, keep spending, keep spending. And so for us, we have a one vote majority right now in Washington, D.C., for us to do the big, beautiful bill, the largest tax cuts in history, and then turn around and do 12 out of 12 approach bills for the first time in 30 years. I think that those are the kind of things that the American people will see that we are really doing the job that you sent us to do to get the spending under control. And it's that approach process. Those CRs were a disaster, omnibuses at the end of every year. And then if you're out there working, you're like, you don't know if the government's going to be funded or we're just going to do a continuing resolution. When we fund it through the normal process, it's funded for a year. And so there's no uncertainty for industry, business, investment, that sort of thing. And so for us, like I said, the USAID, getting rid of that, getting some of this money and fraud flowing to these foreign countries. Look, I'm just going to tell you, man, I hadn't voted for that money in Ukraine. I mean, we sent $176 billion to a young democracy in Ukraine that we knew was corrupt because Burisma was there. And to put it in perspective, Brady, we only spent 52 billion on every road in America in 2022. We sent 176 billion to a young democracy that we knew was corrupt and with no oversight. And that's the kind of thing when you're sending money offshore. I'm convinced it's coming back to corrupt politicians. I'm convinced it's going back to their family members, to the pockets of those people. So that's why I'm like, look, let's cut out the USAID stuff. Let's get a handle on this spending abroad, and let's make sure that we open up here in America and uncover the fraud. So spending abroad, just blowing money like drunk sailors, and then making sure that we don't waste it here in America on people who are not here paying taxes, who didn't come here legally, and they're shipping it overseas. One thing Scott Bessent said he was going to do is if you're on government assistance now, you can't wire money out of the country. So those are the kind of things that if they're just here drawing and they've got this, they're all on the dole and they're shipping it out to foreign countries. That's another thing we can do. So yeah, Congress has not done their job for 30 years. We're in the process and I guess since January now, 10, 11 months, trying to get it done for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, I think fiscal responsibility is a huge deal. And, there's a lot of Americans out there who pay their taxes, follow the law, have to be responsible with how they spend their money. They save, they work hard, and they want to see their leaders doing the same thing. They don't want to see their leaders being irresponsible with how they spend their taxpayer dollars. And so, yeah, I 100% agree that.
Worse than that, Brady, going from a bartender to a net worth of $10 million in five. How do you do that? Or 30 million? I mean, how do these politicians do that? Because they're corrupt. And we've got to, I'm glad we've got Doge. We're working through some of the stuff that Elon had done, and Tim Burchett, my friend's heading up the Doge committee now in House. But I mean, yeah, those are the kind of things that the American people, I don't blame them. They should be ticked off. I'm ticked off about it. And we've got to figure out how to fix it. But we're in the process. And I think that the American people are probably going to be shocked. It's usually worse than you think it is.
Yeah. And look, I don't want to live in a country where the American people don't have trust in their government institutions. I want to see that trust restored. But I think in order to get there, we have to have a government that is fiscally responsible and, aren't being corrupted by all of these alternative interests and really are putting the American people first instead of the people of other countries. And so, yes, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, this nation is in a mess right now. And if Kamala Harris had won, buddy, I think we'd have been done. But the fact that President Trump won when he did, and I tell everybody this, the interest on the national debt's $105,000 a second. That's the interest we're paying. The interest is about to bypass the defense spending for the entire budget for this country every year. And so, yeah, we've got to get it under control. But so much that they used COVID, the Democrats used COVID to go like on steroids 2.0, kind of started printing money. And that just exacerbated the fraud, and then they opened the borders. And those people came here and got on the dole, and they put us in a mess. But I don't trust anybody any better than I do Trump and Bissett to fix this thing.
Yeah.
And I think that we've got the right people in Mike Johnson, even though we have a one vote majority. We seem to be moving the needle better than I thought we could with that slim of a majority.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And a lot rests on the midterms as well, which is, coming up. So that's a very big deal. And that's a good reason for conservatives to get involved and start door knocking and start working hard right now so that we can maintain that majority in the House and Senate.
Yeah, you got to have it because
Yes,
day one they'll impeach him if we don't. I
that's
mean,
right.
and
Yeah.
we'll only got 24 months left with him in November anyway. Once we win this thing, so we sure don't need impeachment to start day one because they did that the first time he was in office. That will cripple his ability to drive the America First agenda across the finish line.
Yes. All right. So, in closing now, I want to wrap it up with one final question, really for, like I mentioned earlier, our Gen Z audience out there right now, because we got a lot of young people who are going to be listening to this. And so, I love to ask our guests this question. I want to know, what is some advice that you would offer to young people out there, students especially, who are, let's just say, aspiring leaders or wanting to get more involved in politics. Maybe they want to run for office one day, or maybe they just want to get more involved and start making a difference and want to take leadership in their communities. What's some advice that you would offer on leadership for young people out there?
For me, man, it's totally about walking in obedience to the Lord. I mean, Psalms 119, 105 says, "Our word is a lamp unto your feet and a light unto your path." And many times people think they're just going to go from point A to point B immediately. But really, your life is not a movie. I mean, it's not a screenshot, it's a movie. So there'll be parts of your life you're probably not proud of. There'll be parts of life that you're doing great. But it's a process. And I think walking in obedience to the Lord for me, I mean, I saw my third grade teacher the other day in Walmart, and I said, "Miss Rollins, I got to tell you, I never dreamed I'd be in Congress." She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Baby, I didn't either." Because you just don't ever know. I mean, as you go through this process, if you will humble yourself before the Lord, He says He knows the plans He has to you, the plans to prosper you and not to do you harm, Jeremiah 29:11. But the more important, I think people often they quote Romans 8:28 says all things work together for good, but it says what? For those who are called according to His purposes. So the best advice I can give you is seek the creator of the universe. He designed you, He built you, He has a plan for your life, and then follow that plan and seek Him in what you do, and He'll direct your path. That's what His word says.
Yeah, amen to that. I love that. All right, so now I'd like to give you a chance, if you would like, to let people know how they can find you, how they can support you. If they want to reach out, how can they get in touch with your campaign? Please just let us know how people can reach out to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's barrymoreforalabama.com. We're the Trump endorsed candidate. JD Vance just endorsed us, and I understand Charlie Kirk's organization, they're rolling out their endorsement in a few weeks.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think this was a lot of really good insights and advice for our young audience out there. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to come on our podcast today.
All right. God bless you, man. Thank you, Brady.
All right. Thank you very much. Congressman Moore, thank you for joining us. All right. And thank you to everyone for tuning in today. And we will see you again next time.